Good evening, welcome to the Buck Stops here. I'm Vishnu Shoma. On the program this evening, the government proposes to amend the Juvenile Justice Act so that even 16-year-olds can be tried as adults in the case of serious crimes. Now, the existing law defines an adult being 18 years of age. But just in the last little while, the United Nations has slammed the government's move, calling it a real step back. On the program this evening, is lowering the juvenile age limit a magic bullet? That's what we are looking at this evening.
हम यही चाहेंगे कि इस नए कानून के तहत उस अपराधी को भी सजा मिले जिसने एक हंसती खेलती जिंदगी खत्म कर दिया.
A day after the cabinet cleared amendments to the Juvenile Justice Act that will permit the JJ board to decide if children between the ages of 16 and 18 can be tried as adults and sent to jail, Nirbhaya's parents want a fresh trial for the juvenile convict who was given a 3-year supervised sentence in an observation home. Under the amendments, juveniles cannot be given the life or death sentence under sections of the Indian Penal Code, but there is no clarity on provisions under other legislations like terror laws and the NDPS Act. The government's decision comes after data shows an increase in crimes by juveniles, a jump of 13% between 2012 and 13. With some arguing that the current law doesn't act as a deterrent, since juveniles act brazenly, knowing they will get away with just a mild punishment. The National Crime Records Bureau data also shows that 67% of juvenile rapists fall under the 16 to 18 age group. The figure is 68% for murder.
I think it's about in terms of a deterrent and trying to look at it from the perspective of the crime rather than the age.
इस तरह के क्राइम कई हुए हैं और जिसमें टेक्निकली 18 से कम के उम्र के लड़के थे, तो उनका जो क्राइम की मॉर्बिडिटी और हॉरर था, वो उसके बाद कुछ बहुत ज़्यादा दिल में रहम बचता नहीं.
But data also shows that in 2013, crimes by children in conflict with the law accounted for just 1.2% of all crimes reported. Reason why many are wondering if the government jumped the gun, swayed by public opinion.
We needed a villain, right? And right now, this adolescent is the villain that, and the scapegoat that this entire nation seems to be baying for blood. What these children between 16 to 18 need is not to be sent to prison. What they need, for Christ's sake, is help.
Some juvenile justice board somewhere may feel the need to transfer a child to the adult system. Another may not feel the need to do so. How are we going to deal with that kind of arbitrariness? I think we need a larger discussion, a greater debate on the issue, and it should go to a parliamentary select committee for review.
It was in 2000 that an NDA government had increased the age of juveniles from 16 to 18 years as per the United Nations Convention on Child Rights. Now the new amendments have once again reignited the debate on whether children in conflict with the law should be treated through reform or retribution. In New Delhi with Himanshu Shekhar, Ketki Angre for NDTV.
Well, on the program this evening, is lowering the juvenile age limit a magic bullet? Will crimes being committed by teenagers end or go down substantially with this move of the government? It's a proposal, it will need to be debated, but it seems that with the numbers that this government has, it's just a matter of time. Well, joining us now to debate this, Colin Gonzalez, the Supreme Court lawyer, Subramaniam Swamy, the leader of the BJP, Himanshu Roy, the ATS chief in Maharashtra, someone who was instrumental in cracking the Shakti Mills rape case and has had extensive experience in dealing with juvenile offenders, Kavita Krishnan, secretary of the All India Progressive Women's Association, Justice R.S. Sodhi, the former Delhi High Court judge, the Congress leader Nagma also with us, and Mansi Bhatia, program manager with the Central Square Foundation, which looks at education. Mansi has taught in government schools in Delhi and will explore or will tell us about the theme of anger, of hate, and some of the issues which affect so many teenagers in a city like Delhi. Dr. Swamy, let me come to you first. In just the last, I think, 20 minutes, the United Nations has sort of come in and they've criticized this move of the government, and they say that the United Nations CRC, which is the Convention on the Rights of the Child, states that children who are accused of offences should be tried separately from adults in a manner consistent with the child's sense of dignity and worth, and what is being proposed constitutes, and they are saying this, a real step back. How do you respond, sir?
I think the United Nations says all kinds of things on all odd occasions. I don't go by that. We go by what the convention of the UN Child UNCRC and the Beijing rules are, and we have not lowered the age from 18 to 16. What the government of India has done is said that the juvenile judge, the judge or the head of the Juvenile Justice Board will decide whether the offence committed is heinous and the person who did it knew what he or she was doing, and that person would be referred to the adult court. In the case of rape and murder and things like that, we think that we need a deterrent punishment rather than a reformatory measure, and this is a decision which is consistent with the practice in the United States, England and many European countries. It's also provided for both in the United Nations Convention as well as in the Beijing rules that the intellectual and emotional maturity has to be taken into account in deciding whether the Rule 18 should be 18 years should be adhered to.
Kavita, do you agree?
I disagree very strongly, as is well known that the women's groups in the country which have been have spoken very strongly on this matter, and the Justice Verma committee also likewise, after a very detailed consultation, had actually come out in favor of retaining it at 18. Let me quickly explain why. Firstly, let me remind that it isn't just the UN Convention on Child Rights that has said this. Let me remind that the government of the day has, and India as a country has also been scolded by the UN CEDAW, which is the Committee Against Violence on Women, which has said very strongly that all the measures that the Indian government is supposed to take to protect women have not been taken. So all the measures recommended have not been taken, and the one measure which was not recommended, which is expressly forbidden, has been taken. Okay, and this is, you know, you're flying in the face of international not only opinion but experience. Subramanian Swamy mentions America. Let me tell him that, let me quickly tell you that in the US in 2007 there was a task force that showed that there's increased recidivism among juveniles who are put into the jail system rather than retained in the juvenile system. The same data showed up in a 2011 study by the US Department of Justice. Again in 2012 by the US Attorney General's National Task Force on Children Exposed to Violence. This is a series, and which is why 10 US states have actually moved away from that system now. So actually they are moving in the opposite direction, and we seem to be heading off in the same direction. One final point there, that the argument here is not about the heinousness of the crime. No doubt the crimes are heinous. The point is, how does one prevent it is the question, and there you have to take into account that you know, when one is talking about maturity, this is not just some emotional response.
I'm going to interrupt you there because that's another part of the debate. We'll spend time on that.
Yeah.
Himanshu Roy, as a police officer yourself, do you believe that there is, when you're dealing with a juvenile offender who's committed a crime, a serious crime, whether it's murder or rape, do you often come across juveniles who are effectively adults but for their age, or is there a definite difference in the way they talk, their emotional levels, their intelligence quota, their development? How do you deal with these issues?
Good evening, Vishnu. I think you have answered part of the question in your question itself. The issue before us today and the call which the government has to take is that how long is society going to go on suffering atrocities from people who are juvenile in every sense of the word. I correct myself, who are criminals in every sense of the word, except in chronology. So they commit heinous crimes. The crimes have depravity, perversity. Adult crimes like rape are committed, and on a mere technicality that the person is 17 years and 364 days old, we reduce the punishment. In fact, we don't punish him. We remand him to a home, a special home for 3 years. It does seem odd. In my experience as a police officer, and especially in the Shakti Mills case which you mentioned, I can tell you that the offences which were committed by the juvenile in this case, in fact the juveniles in both the Shakti Mills rapes, were no less depraved, no less perverse, no less aggressive, no less violent than the others. And in fact they took a lead. Even in the case of Damini, a lead was taken by the juvenile. And it does seem odd and a miscarriage of justice that a person who has aggressively and voluntarily committed the crime is let off on a mere technicality such as this.
Okay, I know you want to come in, but I wanted to bring in Colin Gonzalez as well. Sir, this is a top cop talking from experience in having interrogated juvenile offenders. And he's named 2 cases, but officers like Himanshu Roy would have come across dozens of such cases. Why do you believe that someone like him is necessarily wrong in his interpretation of how justice needs to be delivered in these cases?
Well, if he looked at his own data of the National Crime Records Bureau, which is the police department, he would know, I suppose, that there's just juvenile crime is just something like 2%. Sexual offences is just 2% of the crimes in the country.
1.2%.
So he knows 1.2%, 2%. So he knows that it's actually very, very small of the percentage of the crimes in the country. But let's take him at face value and say that yes, some juveniles are engaging in quite heinous offences. Shouldn't we look at the reasons why juvenile aggression is increasing? Take Delhi, for example. You have something like 200,000 children on the streets of Delhi. We are doing cases of juveniles being called into police station and sodomized. We are doing cases of children being called into police station and made to clean toilets. You know, so you have such high levels of crime, such high levels of violence against juveniles. Is it any surprise that the poor, the illiterate juveniles are actually getting a feeling that India is not a country for them at all, that nobody cares for them?
Mr. Gonzalez,
I'm doing case after case of juveniles in
Kavita, I'll come to you next, but let me just, you were talking about NCRB data, and Kavita was as well. But let me just present some data, because it depends on how you're interpreting this.
Yes.
In 2013, there were almost 39,000 juveniles arrested under the IPC, 2,074 juveniles apprehended for rape. You can say that this constitutes a very small percentage in terms of the overall numbers, but the numbers of 2,074 in itself is quite shocking. And 66.6% of the juveniles arrested were in the 16 to 18 age group. How is this insignificant, sir? Kavita, I'll come to you in half a second.
Look, I think you need to look at, when you talk about rape by juveniles, there's a whole range of cases mixed up in that.
Yes,
for example,
yes, precisely.
Love affairs between juveniles
Precisely.
are also categorized as statutory rape and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Or rape. So if you look at these statistics carefully, you might find possibly that it's not as alarming as people make it out to be. It's quite normal for a society of 1,200 million people to have these levels of sexual offences.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
But you must look, Vishnu, you must look.
Yeah,
I
go ahead,
wanted
Mr.
to look
Gonzalez.
at the very awesome levels of violence against juveniles in the state system. I'm doing cases of juveniles
and we will do this. Kavita, briefly make your point.
Children molested, children sexually abused.
Okay, we'll discuss that. But
Rise
Kavita wanted to
to
come in. Go ahead,
anger
Kavita.
and frustration among the young in India.
Yes, I wanted to make the point that the point about maturity here is not some kind of layperson's understanding of maturity that we are talking about. We can't say, oh, rape is an adult crime. That's saying nothing. When we say maturity, this is in a neurological sense. There are neurological studies that show that the part of the brain, the frontal cortex, which is called the CEO of the brain, the part of the brain that involves planning, figuring out the consequence of your decisions and your actions, this does not develop in young people until they become fully mature. And this adolescent age, this teenage age, this is precisely the age when this is really quite weak. So of course there are sexual, the tendency to commit a crime. I know even 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds who have committed heinous murders and even rapes. That does not mean that these crimes become adult crimes. Let us understand, this is not. The other thing is that how does one address the whole question of these crimes? Nobody is denying that sometimes these crimes are committed. Colin made one of the points I wanted to make, which is that for instance, the Hindu report showed recently 40% of cases filed in Delhi, which have come to trial in Delhi in 6 months, have actually been false cases of rape foisted by the parents of girls who have run away. So I'm not going into that again. I'm trying to say that if one wants to correct those juveniles who are actually committing rapes or murders and so on, you have to understand that this capacity for judgment and so on is flawed. I also want to quickly counter the point which was made about that in the December 16th case, the juvenile was the most depraved. Yeah. This is false because the Juvenile Justice Board found this to be false. So let us not continuously repeat that here. Ram Singh was supposed to be the main perpetrator there, not the juvenile.
Mr. Roy, would you like to come in on this particular point that when we are using the word rape, we have to look at the circumstances in which the charges have been laid. So therefore, if one talks about an increase in the number of juvenile rapists in the country, there could be relationships over here between teenagers which are technically, according to the law, categorized as rape. These weren't acts of violence per se.
Vishnu, I think we should limit the scope of this debate to genuine crime, genuine rape, genuine murder and so on and so forth. We are really not discussing cases of love affairs gone sour and things like that.
Then don't use statistics. Then don't use statistics, because the statistics show those false cases as well.
I will neither use statistics nor interruption, ma'am. Thank you. The point being made about maturity is an interesting one, because the composition of the Juvenile Justice Board itself under law consists of a magistrate who must have a background in child psychology, and 2 members who are social workers, one of whom must be a woman. So these are people with experience in dealing with issues of child maturity, I dare say. So if the Juvenile Justice Board holds a person as triable under the normal law between the age of 16 and 18, I think we should take their word for it, because they have considered every single point and argument which is made by activists, with due respect, about the maturity of that person.
Okay. Justice, so one of the criticisms which has been raised about reducing the age is that that is an arbitrary decision. What about potential rapists who are 15 years old, and there are cases like this? So why arbitrarily reduce that number from 18 to 16? On what basis is this being done?
I don't think the juvenile age has been reduced. The definition has not changed.
So in terms of punishment, so in terms of punishment, sir, for heinous crimes, 16-year-olds can be tried. But my question is, on what basis, in certain cases, rape, murder and a handful of other cases, but the reduction in the age, it seems arbitrary. How are we to decide that a 15-year-old cannot commit such a crime or can commit such a crime, but the limit is 16 now? Is that correct in your assessment?
See, as far as the reduction of age is concerned, whether they can be tried as adult criminals. See, the main thing really is his mental capacity, his built up, or whether he is capable of understanding what he has done, and also whether he is capable of understanding the consequences of what he has done. Once you arrive at a conclusion that the maximum crimes are committed between 16 and 18, then you're only subdividing the juvenile into a total juvenile and a marginalized juvenile. The law has will probably take care that these are only aberrations of a juvenile, which will go to such courts and will not become an order of the day.
Okay.
So therefore,
Justice Sodhi, finish your
so
point.
Therefore,
yes.
Yes. Therefore, we should not be alarmed at the use of a juvenile being tried in a particular fashion, because he is still not tried by the regular court. He would still be tried by the children court.
Okay, fair point.
And mind you, he cannot be sent to prison. He cannot be sent to prison unless he is 21 years. And which means his conduct is reviewed again to find out whether he has reformed.
Justice Sodhi,
what is there in the new law?
Justice Sodhi,
that's what I think.
This is reviewed. A person, a teenager can be sent to jail, but cannot be sent to life in jail, and cannot be
Capital
executed. Right?
Even
Capital punishment cannot be allowed.
Even that is not accurate, Vishnu.
Okay.
Actually, the present law, nobody has seen the present draft because it has been kept so secret. The cabinet hasn't made it public for discussion, which is shameful. But I saw a copy today with Komal Girotra of CRY, and she has Komal Ganotra of CRY, and she said that in fact she has carefully perused it, and the law in fact allows for even death penalty and life imprisonment as long as it is not under the IPC laws. If it is under the Narcotics Act or maybe other acts like other acts which permit for these crimes, it's possible because it's a very loosely, very shoddily drafted draft.
I don't know which she's seen.
Why don't you make it public?
As far as the law is concerned, as I have seen the draft, and I certainly was involved with Ms. Menaka Gandhi on this, the fact of the matter is that the discretion will be that of the Juvenile Justice Board chairman, whether to refer it to an adult court or not, but subject to, and I have seen this in cold print, that you will not give death penalty and you will not give life imprisonment. Now, the question is, we are going to have tough questions to face. Take for example Kasab. He claimed to be a juvenile. Right. In fact, there were women's groups which had written a big, signed a big memorandum that we should be lenient with him. Right. We are after all a democracy. This country has to have respect for the law. And if the overwhelming opinion is that man Kasab should be hanged, well, he was hanged because he was an adult, in the sense he couldn't prove that he was juvenile. But supposing he was a juvenile and didn't hang him, there would have been a great upheaval. So I am saying, first, don't exaggerate it. There are of course malfunctions of the criminal law. There are policemen misbehaving not only with children, but they are misbehaving with women who come there to register an FIR. That can't be an argument. And you can't have an argument that because you lowered the age, the incidents increase, because we don't know if the law had not been changed, how much would the increase have been. These are nonsense correlations which people use who have not studied the problem in depth. Today we are finding that the question is, as Justice Sodhi very correctly said, if you have the mens rea, that is, you knew what you are doing. And certainly I would say the person who raped Nirbhaya knew exactly what he was doing, but what he did, no person unknowingly would have done it. Yes, stealing a pastry in a bakery or a cycle from a stand, that's a different kind of thing. There you can treat it different. But these kinds of crimes, you have to treat them under the IPC. Incidentally, you said about why is it arbitrary. England has 14. Our own IPC till this law was changed was 12. So this is based on the
rise in crimes between those who are...
Absolutely. They didn't agree with the UN. They said that the UN doesn't take into account the country's position. We think our children become mature at 14 on these matters, and therefore we will have the option of trying them as adults if they committed a certain kind of crime.
Both UK and the US are actually moving away from that understanding now, based on the... One minute.
There's nothing on
May
record.
I finish?
I will finish.
So then let me finish. I am saying that he's saying there is no study. These are studies that I quoted precisely based on a comparison between the life cycle, between the trajectory of juveniles who were retained in the juvenile system and juveniles who were sent into the jail system. And these are studies based on those comparisons that say that those sent into the jail system almost invariably repeated crimes, almost invariably remained in a life of crime, whereas the other juveniles largely had a shot at reform and could actually lead adjusted life after that. These are based on very detailed studies. So let us not accuse accuse the women's organizations of all people of not having a closer study of what causes violence against women and how to fight it. We are not saying this out of, I'm saying this out of a concern for how to prevent crimes against women. Right. And there I will say that this government has a strange position where they can't make up their minds whether they want to teach sex education in schools or not. Okay, they don't want to teach teenagers how to deal with, with sexuality and so on and so forth. They're very squeamish about that. But at the same time, they want to treat them as adults when it comes to a crime, when it comes to having a crime having been committed. You don't want to invest in correcting the juvenile correctional homes now, which are in an abysmal state of affairs where rapes are happening right there. Colin is perfectly right.
But they've not said that they won't.
No, but they haven't spent. Where is the budgetary allocation on that? Where is the budgetary allocation on that?
I have never said anything about women's organization. I only say about these Naxalite left-wing
organizations. No, you will not do that.
I will.
Swami, your minister today has ban bikinis. Your minister has ban bikinis. You will not do this.
No women's organization.
I will say the last time the word you used against me when I was on the television channel with you are shameful. You committed sexual harassment on TV against me.
You yourself are a Naxalite. Are you not a Naxalite?
You will not do it ever again. You will not turn this.
Oh yes, you are left-wing extremists.
You are the people who said ban bikinis. Today your PW minister
I have not said ban bikinis. You can wear bikinis for all I care.